All right, what's up, guys, everyone? This is Spencer with Handlebar Labs. Today, I'm going to continue working on the global alert system that I'm trying to build that I can use in various React Native apps. Basically, what's happening right now is we've got this alert that'll show up down at the bottom. If I go ahead, open up app.js, find the right one, and I change where the alert is showing up, we can say display modal instead. Open it, it'll show up as a modal here. Basically, we've got the basic API all set up. We started this on a stream yesterday, and I'll just do a little bit more work today. I think what I'm hoping to do today is connect this CTA related stuff, and then also basically give a way to close the different modals. So we can click outside of the modal right now, but if we actually display it from the bottom, we can't do that as of right now. There's no way to actually close this. So we'll add a way to close it, and then depending on how we're doing on time, maybe add some animations for the modal to fade in, and then the bottom and top alerts to basically slide in from their respective areas. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. One thing that I noticed when I was reviewing the code afterwards, I made a typo inside of globalalerts.js in the alert provider. This should actually be, so down here I've got alert consumer.provider. This should actually be alert context.provider. So that should be fine. Go ahead and save this. Actually, I'm going to export alert context as well in case we would some reason need that. If I press this, everything should work the same. Cool. So that is the case. Let's go ahead and create a way to actually close this first and foremost, just to make sure it works. So what I'm going to do is, actually there's already an assets directory here. I'm going to add a couple of close icons that we can use in our app. So these are just, basic exits to go ahead and close it. It's just an icon I found online. So what do we have here? Well, we've got these two things which are rendering the same. Let's actually go ahead and pull this out into its own little function so we can say render body. We can go ahead and take these. And the reason I'm doing this is just to go ahead and basically not repeat myself as much as I possibly can, and with the idea that eventually I'm going to want to set it up so like this body is configurable depending on who's using it. Now what I've done here is just gone ahead, pull it into a function, and then I'm using this react.fragment because we can only return one element from a React component, so I'm just wrapping these text in a react.fragment because the actual containing view is going to be different between these two. So what we can do is actually say, down here we can just call this.render body, and we can do the same down here. So if I save this, everything looks the same. Excellent, wonderful. We can go ahead and get rid of this title and body over here. So what I'm going to do now is, let's see, so we've got the body, and then we could render a header. I think the header is going to be different for each of these, so we won't go ahead and pull it into its own component at this point. Since we're working with the bottom one currently, let's go ahead and add that header here. What would I want to do? So I'll create a view. Call this styles dot, rather style is equal to styles dot. Actually, let's hold off on this because this is going to display differently whether it's the modal, bottom, or the top. It's going to be different in each one. So I'm going to hold off on that just so I can think about it a little bit more. Something I think we could do is actually go ahead and let's go ahead and change, or rather wrap this, basically the bottom, we'll wrap this in a touchable without feedback, and we'll call this .close on it, just like we are for the modal. That way we can go ahead and just tap it and it'll close when it's open. So we can see that, that's good. Now I'd like to go ahead and actually fix, basically I'm just, artificially padding all of this, and I don't want to do that. So what's happening in container styles is if it's bottom, we're pushing the styles.bottom. Okay, so this alert container is where we're doing all of this padding stuff, which is what we want to get rid of, this padding vertical. And we want to replace this with a SafeArea View. But what happens when we do this is it's jittering in a weird way. So let's go ahead and add this back around the content. Yeah, let's just see what happens here again. Okay, so it's not jittering. Maybe it was just the way I had it. Oh yeah, there's that jitter again. So I'm really not sure why it would be doing that. Actually, go ahead and look it up. Hopefully my computer fan isn't too loud because it's screaming right now. This isn't really... So the reason I don't... Basically, I want to make sure that this background is actually extending down below the activity indicator or the home area thing. So I don't want to wrap this view in it, which I guess we can just go demo to see. So if I save this and then I open, you can see everything's kind of hidden. Actually, that doesn't make any sense either. Oh, okay, so here's an interesting thing. Let's go ahead and undo this. So I wonder if it has something to do with the absolute positioning. Thinking, let's see. So this container styles, we're starting with this alert container. Okay, and it's got this absolute positioning. Is this messing it up? Because when we open it, okay, so the body's not moving here. Whoops. So this is all fine. And then if I wrap this in a SafeArea View, why is this bugging out on me? Okay, maybe it's not having an issue right now. Well, we'll keep an eye on that and see. We'll add just a little bit of padding vertical here. We'll just set this to 10. Okay, see, now it's... Yeah, no, the app's completely unresponsive. Okay, so let's switch things up. What I'm going to do, React Native SafeArea View, try to minimize dependencies as much as possible. But I know I've used this React Native SafeArea View many times and it works quite quite well. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my project. Examples global. Okay, so I'm going to say yarn add this. Let's go check what exactly this exports. If I can find it now. Oh, I forgot to close this. Here. Okay, now we can actually see the whole screen. Well, that's a bummer. Okay, so you guys might not have actually been able to even see what I was doing. So what's happening right now is this thing's jittering really bad right now. Yeah, so we can see down here, it's jittering really bad. And that's what we're trying to fix now that my face isn't actually covering up that problem. Okay, so what does this export? I think it's just, okay. Export SafeArea View. So we can say import SafeArea View from React Native SafeArea View. Save this and let's see how things work now. Okay, this doesn't want to work. Don't know what that means. I'll just try to refresh it. All right, that's not going to work. Add that to the right folder. This is going to open. Okay, so let's see. While this is waiting, what I'm going to do is actually import the button component from React Native. Yeah, from React Native. Okay, so if I open this, I'm not seeing that jitter, but we're not seeing any functionality either. So I think what's happening with that SafeArea view is it was jittering because of the absolute positioning and the measuring of the elements there, I think was throwing it off. So with this, we're able to set a force inset, this React Native SafeArea view, and we can say bottom always. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we see that's working fine. It's fixing the issue. Now, what's going to happen here is, So we need to set this force inset to be correct, whether it's displayed on the top or bottom. So what I'm going to do is create an object. I'll just call this force inset. Create a variable up here, const force inset. Just make that an empty object. And if it's bottom, we can say force inset dot bottom is going to equal always. And then likewise, if it's top, we'll set the force inset top to be always. So if I press this, that's good. If I go to app and I set this to top, press that. So that still is a little bit off. Okay, it works this time. So this is looking a lot better. And basically we're telling it, we know with this force inset that we know that it's definitely going to hit basically either the top indicator or the bottom indicator if it's on a device with a notch, or something that obstructs the screen, something software that obstructs the screen. And we can basically tell it, you don't need to render it and then measure it to figure out if it's being displayed or hidden, and it just saves a render cycle, and hopefully that'll fix that jittering issue that we were having. And so we can actually move on to what we wanted to today. So what we want to do now is actually handle this, basically the call to action. And I'm just going to keep this very basic and just use a normal React Native button component for now. So we can say CTA text and CTA on press. Those are the props we're passing from here. So we got CTA text and CTA on press. And then if we go down here, basically we only want this button to show up if there is some call to action. So we can say if CTA on press, and then we can go ahead and render that button. The title is going to be equal to the CTA text, and the on press is going to be equal to the CTA on press. Let's make sure we set a default for the CTA on press. It's going to be null, and then the CTA text is just going to be an empty string. Okay, so we'll save this. Oh, we actually want to pass update state based on these values. So we can go ahead and add these. I'll save it. Now when I press this, we see we got this. We've got our little alert showing up. And basically, let's see, what we want to do when this is pressed is not only call the action that the user passed, but we also want to go ahead and close this. So what I can do, go ahead and do a little bit of reformatting quickly. So I need to set up prettier in this. Okay, so basically for this on press, we know CTA on press has been passed. So what I'll say is I'll create a new function and I'll call CTA on press, and then I'll also call this .close. So basically when that CTA is pressed, we'll automatically go ahead and close the actual alert as well. So we can see that's happening fine. So that's good. That was kind of one of the main objectives. We've got our CTA showing up. Let's go ahead and test this out on the different types just to make sure nothing's hidden. Okay, and then we can test the modal. Okay, it's showing up now. That's strange. So that's good to go. I'm going to add this in here just so I remember. So we've got bottom, top, and modal. We'll stick with top, actually. So next thing we want to do is let's actually get this to animate in instead of just kind of fading in, or rather just jumping in. So I'll go back to global alerts. I'm going to want to import animated from React Native. Okay, so what do we want to do? So when the alert happens, we're going to want to basically go from, let's just say 0 to 1. So we're going to create a new variable here. We'll call this animated value, and that's going to be equal to a new animated.value, and we'll set that to 0. So what do we want to do? So by default, when it's visible, we want to actually render the component, but we want to render it off of the screen. So how do we want to do this? Well, so thinking about the top right now, since that's what we're rendering, we've got this top 0, which means it's just going to immediately show on the top. But we want to basically have it show up off of the screen. So like up here, and then we'll animate it down. So what we can do, let's go down here. first thing we want to do okay, so we're looking at this one for right now. We've got this touch flow without feedback. Let's actually go ahead and move this inside of this view. Just want to see what this looks like. Because we're going to have to convert this view to an animated view. Open this. Okay, that's working fine. That's cool. So what we want to do now is turn this view into an animated dot view so that we can actually use an animated variable on it. And then let's see if it's top, we're going to put that stylus.top. We'll also do container stylus.push. We'll do a transform. Which is going to take an array, which is going to take an object, maybe, we'll see. Translate y. And then this is going to be this dot animated value dot interpolate. So this value is going to go from an input range of 0 to 1. It's hard to read. Okay. To the comment that is asking about React Native already including a SafeArea view, it does, but I was running into an issue with it kind of jittering and jumping around because of the way it works. So I used a different one, which allows us to basically force an inset to tell it we know this is going to hit, the activity indicator or the notch at the top of the screen. So you don't need to measure it; just automatically give us that correct padding on an iPhone 10. So that's why we're using that SafeArea view. Back to this animation. So we've got an output range. Basically, I think what I want to do is when it's at 0, I want this to just be, I'm going to create a variable called w, and that's going to be the height of the screen, basically the window. And then when it's at 1, I want that to be 0. So let's go ahead and create this w. So what I need to first do is create or import dimensions. Whoops. And then I can say const w is going to be dimensions dot get window. And then we've got that w dot height. So if I save this, nothing's going to change. Or rather, it's not going to show up because the value's still at 0. But what we want to do is, so we've got this dot animated value. Why is there an error here? Oh, okay, just linting. Okay, so basically we're going to set the state, which is going to render the component as visible. It's just going to render it off the screen. Once that successfully happens, and we know that by basically passing a callback to this dot set state, we can say animated dot timing this dot animated value, and we're going to set a to value of 1, and we're going to use the native driver. Because we're using a transform, we can use the native driver, which is going to make or help make our animation a little bit more performant, and ensure it happens smoothly regardless of what else is going on. And that's why I'm not doing like animating the height or something. So if I press this, oh, it's not happening because with an animated.time, you need to go ahead and call .start. Press that, and you can see it actually shows up from the top. So that's looking good. I'll just say duration is going to be, just say 150 milliseconds. Try this again. Okay, so it's sliding in quickly from the top, which is what we're looking for. Cool. Let's go ahead and do this now for the close. This time, though, we want to animate the element off of the screen, and then we want to update the state. So this time we can actually pass a callback to .start, which will say once this animation is complete, it'll go ahead and call this callback function in which we want to actually update the state and basically dispose of that view that we were previously rendering. And the only other difference we want to do here is we want to set the to value to 0 again. So if I open this, slides in, close it, slides out. That looks good. The only difference now, so, well, let's first go ahead and do this for the bottom as well. So we've got this container style here for top. Basically, we can do the same thing for bottom. This time, though, we just want to do an output range of height. That way it goes off the bottom of the screen. Actually, well, let's leave it at minus just to show you the difference here. So we'll set this to bottom now. And if I save this and then press it, you can see it slides all the way over the top of the screen. That's not what we want. We want to just use the height. That way it slides up from the bottom of the screen. Now, using height is obviously, it's going to show the content later than we expect because it's got an entire screen worth to go ahead and render over. So something we can do is actually measure this content, get the height of this content. How would we do this? Yeah, we could get the height of this content and then use that as the offset. So I think that's going to be easier said done than said. So looking at this, I think it's on layout. I actually need to pull this up. Okay. And then I'm going to set up a this.onLayout. So let's actually go ahead. We're going to set the initial state content height to be w.height. And then we'll set up another function on layout. Basically, this is going to take this takes a native event, I think. Maybe it's like this, native event. And then we're going to want to get const height. Okay, height is going to be equal to native event dot layout dot height. And then I'm just going to go ahead and alert this real quickly to, geez, I can't spell. Okay, alert this to make sure we actually get this. Okay, so it's showing the content. It shows two different values. That's interesting. But basically, we can debug it later. So we'll set content height to be height. And then we'll use content height basically to replace this w.height. So we can pull this off of state. So we've got content height, or rather this one's going to be content height, and then this is going to be w.content height. So let's just see what happens here. So it slides in a bit more smoothly just because it's just off of the screen. Okay, that way, basically we're not like, showing the slide across the entire screen. So this is looking good. Let's check the top as well. Okay, that's looking good. Next, let's just go ahead and finish this off by doing the modal version. Now, how do we want to do this? So if I actually go back to app, I'll set display to modal. Open this and you can see it's just popping up. Just ignore the styling. So we have this animated view. We're going to want this styles.modal to be a new animated .view. And then we'll set up a new variable called modal styles. Const modal styles is equal to an array of styles.modal. So everything should look the same. Excellent. Okay, and then we can add an else if here. If display is equal to modal, we're going to say container, or rather modal styles dot push. We're going to put an object on here. Again, we're going to do a transform. This time though, instead of a translate y, we're going to do a scale, I think. Need to pull this up. Basically, I constantly have the React Native docs pulled up as I'm working on anything React Native related, just because I'm constantly referencing it. So we're going to look at transform. So inside of transform, we can pass an array of objects. I'm looking for scale. Okay, so yeah, we can't just pass scale in here. So that's good. Let's go ahead and do that. Basically, actually, since our animated value is going from 0 to 1, we can just go ahead and use that directly. We don't need to interpolate that in any way. Basically, I always like to set up my animated values to go from 0 to 1, just because I can always interpolate the values and basically make it do whatever I need. Or I can just, if something that goes from 0 to 1, it works perfect for me. So now if I press this, you can see it's sliding in. If we go ahead and slow it down, you can see it's slowly coming in, slowly scaling in. So that's cool. Something else we could even do here, which typically scaling from 0 to 1 is a bit jarring, so I'll like to add an opacity, this dot animated value as well. Press this and it kind of slowly fades in and actually scales in. So something I also like to do, basically scaling from 0 to 1, doesn't always look the most natural, so I'll actually go ahead and interpolate that. I'll leave that opacity on there. And from 0 to 1, I can set the input range, I can set the output range, and then, let's see. Let's just say we start at 0.5 and we go up to 1. And this kind of just looks a little bit more natural, I think. So we've got that combination of opacity and transform coming in here. So let's go ahead and set this to the value we had previously. Cool. So we got this opacity popping in quickly, and that's all set up and good to go. I think that's pretty much it. Today's video, we covered, debugging a SafeArea view when things are jittering, and introduced the React Native SafeArea View, which is an alternative I use instead of the React Native SafeArea View quite a lot, just because there's more options on how you can actually force an inset. Actually, I'll go ahead and turn my camera on again. So we covered the SafeArea View to just try to make sure we can control as much as possible and provide the best user experience possible. We also went ahead and turned on these CTAs if they exist. So if we go ahead and go back to app.js, and we don't pass a CTA text or CTA on press this, it doesn't show up. Say this is just notifying the user something's going on. That's cool. We've gone ahead and added that to our project. And then finally, what we went ahead and did was work with animation. So we can slide the top and bottom alerts in. We can fade and scale the modal alert in. And something we did for the top and bottom, if we go back to app.js, set this to top so you can see it, bring that down. What we're doing is actually using gotta go back to global alerts. We're using the dimensions API to go ahead, or rather we're not using the dimensions API. We're using a view on layout callback to go ahead and get the height of this content once it's rendered, so that we can basically perfectly display this content just off of the screen once it's rendered. And once it's rendered, we take the measurement of it, then we can go ahead and actually animate that value in. And it just makes for a really natural looking alert that kind of comes in. So yeah, that was pretty much it for today. Start off a little rough with that SafeArea View issues, but I hope you found something valuable in here. And I look forward to working on this global alert system a little bit more in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.